Hey everyone, it's Kenji, and we're gonna make a Panzanella salad. This is one of many great tomato and bread dishes. This one's especially great because it uses up stale bread, but I don't know, tomato and bread dishes, like there's, you know, like gazpacho is a tomato and bread dish, technically. Pam tomaquet, you know, bread with tomatoes, Catalan style, or Catalonian. I can never remember if it's Catalonian or Catalan when you're talking about food. Papa al pomodoro, like a bread and tomato stew. Tomato mayo toast, or just like a southern style, you know, white bread, Duke's mayo, great tomato sandwich. This is another one of those things. So I'm starting out with some bread. This is homemade, but you want some kind of like rustic, you know, rough country style bread. Sourdough's great. Anything that has a kind of a rough crumb and is not enriched, you know, so no milk, no butter, no eggs, nothing like that, just flour, water, yeast, salt. That's what you're looking for. And you want to kind of, you can tear it up into chunks. You can chop it. This is all based on a Serious Eats recipe I published, which I'll put a link to. And that one, I think I chopped it into cubes, but tearing it up gives you some nice texture. And so the idea here is that we're going to take this bread. It's essentially a bread and tomato salad. So we're going to take this bread and we're going to toss it with tomatoes and olive oil and some flavorings. This might be, that one's a little too far gone. All right, so we've got our bread here. Now, what you want is, it doesn't have to be stale bread. This happens to be stale bread, but what you really want is dry bread. So dry and stale are two different things. I'm sure you've heard me talk about this before, but stale is what happens to bread when the starch retrogrades, like this, the gelatinized starch recrystallizes, and it causes the bread to kind of go stiff. So if you've ever had like a bagel that's more than like, you know, from a bagel shop, like not a proper bagel, not one from the supermarket, but like a proper bagel that has sat around for like an hour or two, it gets really, really tough and difficult to eat. That's not because it's dried out, it's because it's gone stale. With a Panzanella salad, we want our bread to really be dry, not just stale, dry, because we want it to absorb some tomato juice. All right, so all I've done here so far, I've torn it up, extra virgin olive oil, salt and pepper. I'm gonna put it in this 350 degree oven, and we're gonna let it dry out. It'll toast a little bit, that's fine. Toasting adds flavor, but it'll dry out, which is what we're looking for mainly. And then what else do I got? I got some really great heirloom tomatoes. Right now is the season for tomatoes for me. It's right now it's mid-August. I don't know exactly when this video will go, but hopefully before the end of tomato season. Got some really great heirloom tomatoes. I've got some garlic. I've got some shallot. Now, the problem I've had in the past with Panzanella salads is that they always end up kind of soggy. You know, you make them and you construct them and you toss your bread and tomatoes together and you dress it, and then when you get ready to serve it, you end up with this kind of big pool of tomato juice, and that's because if you properly dress your tomatoes, you know, if you make what looks like a reasonable amount of dressing, and you dress your bread and tomatoes, and there's nothing like sort of pooling up at the bottom of the salad bowl, your tomatoes, and if you've seasoned them, you know, if you just added salt to them, what's going to happen is that your tomatoes, that salt is going to draw out juices from them, and so as the salad sits, tomato juices get drawn out and the salad becomes soggier and soggier. So the idea I had for sort of solving that problem is that rather than dressing the raw tomatoes with the dressing, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, and you'll see me do this in a second, but I'm going to salt the tomatoes, and I'm going to let that salt, let those tomatoes sit for about, you know, while the bread toasts, so essentially, you know, maybe 10-15 minutes or so. And during that time, God, look at how good that tomato. This one's called, I think, a hillbilly. These hillbilly tomatoes are these kind of red and orange, really dense, amazing ones for BLTs. Anyhow, as the tomato sits, the juices are going to be exuded because of that salt. And then we're going to use that juice as the basis for our dressing. So we're going to emulsify it into a salad dressing along with some other ingredients. And that way we get all the flavor that was in that tomato. We use up all the juice. We don't waste anything. And all the flavor is kind of built in. Let me do one more half a tomato, and I'll save these other half tomatoes for, I don't know, a caprese salad. You can use whatever tomatoes you want. These just happen to be, these heirlooms, but you just want to make sure that they're nice, bright, nice, juicy summer tomatoes that you've gotten as locally as possible so that they don't have to ship them around. All right, so I got my tomatoes here. I'm not measuring anything. If you want to measure things, you can. I will provide a link to a recipe with more precise measurements for all these things, but I never do. I just make what looks right and what tastes good. All right, tomatoes, gonna toss them in a little salt in a fine mesh strainer over a bowl, okay? And you can see it's already starting, the juice is already starting to come out. So we're gonna let that sit there just for while we prep the rest of the ingredients, while the bread dries and while we prep the rest of our ingredients. Let me just clean up my cutting board real quick. I have one. Save those tomatoes for later. Oop, I hear my daughter running. I don't know if she's coming to get me. Might have to pop out for a second. I hear her running upstairs. All right. Now, our other ingredients. We got some garlic. I'm gonna smash it. Just a couple cloves. Smash and mince. You can use a garlic press if you want. The only thing I would not do for this kind of recipe is the jarred garlic. I generally tell people, usually store-bought stuff is fine. And for many things, store-bought is fine. Garlic, jarred garlic pre-minced is not one of those cases. It can be okay if you're gonna cook with it, but certainly in a fresh salad like this where the garlic is going in raw, you wanna use real garlic here, okay? Or at least I want to. If you like the jarred stuff and you think you can put it in your salad, then, good for you. Go for it. All right, garlic in the bowl. That's actually a lot of garlic. My daughter loves garlic, so we're going heavy on the garlic. You can do just one clove if you want. Those are two kind of giant cloves. All right, we got a shallot. You don't have to use shallot. You could use a red onion for this. That would be tasty. You could use some pickled red onions even if you've. Oh, actually, give me a second. Wait a second. I think I'm gonna grab some pickled red onions. I will leave there's a recipe for I have a recipe for this on Serious Eats, for these on Serious Eats. I'll leave a link also to, I think Ethan has Ethan Klobowski. I'm sorry, I should learn how to pronounce his name, I apologize. But Ethan, I'm sure you know him, does some good videos, and he has a recipe for pickled red onions that are a little different from mine, but will work nicely, and it's a video worth watching, so I'll leave a link to that too. All right, so pickled red onions, minced shallot, I mince shallots basically the same way I mince onions, so I go vertically first, then depending on how big it is, a couple horizontal ones, and yes, those horizontal ones do make a difference to the final size of the dice. No matter what some people might tell you, it makes a difference. All right, mince them like that. So this is, I'm basically making, I'm gonna end up making like a very, very simple vinaigrette. And I'm using all the techniques I would to make a vinaigrette. So I'm starting with my aromatics, my onions, or my shallots and my garlic. They're going in there. And then the tomato juice is going to be part of the liquid. I'm going to supplement that with some vinegar. So I'm going to add about a tablespoon of vinegar for this amount of tomato. That's just champagne vinegar. You can use red wine, white wine, cider vinegar would work fine for this. Even something like balsamic would work if you wanted to. Got a little Dijon mustard. This is going to act as our emulsifier. So just a little bit. And then we're going to do a real rough chop of basil leaves, and that's going to be our final garnish. And that's basically everything that goes into the salad. If you don't like basil, parsley would also be great in the salad like this, as would even something like a little crazier, like like mint would be really delicious in this. cilantro if you like cilantro. Okay, all right, so now I'm gonna let my tomatoes rest while my bread finishes baking. So I will be back in just about 5 minutes ish. I don't know, maybe it was 10 minutes, maybe it was 3. I don't know, it was some number of minutes that I'm sure someone will tell you based on the clock on the thing, which is not correct. It's not really 9:20 right now. It's actually like 6 o'clock. I don't know why it's off. All right, so our bread, you can see that it's dry. All right, which is what we want. I'm gonna set this aside, let it cool just slightly. Take a sip of my delicious Fremont Ollie. Good. All right. Tomatoes have drained mainly. Give it a little toss. I tossed it a couple times in the interim as well. But you can see most of the juices coming out. There's little drops falling still, but we've gotten most of that excess juice out, which is what we're going for. All right, so now this is the liquid element of our vinaigrette, our water, you know, our water-based element. Tomato juice is basically water. And then we're gonna drizzle in some olive oil. And this could probably take about half a cup or so. We'll see. Maybe a third of a cup, given the amount of juice that's in there. But essentially you wanna go for a ratio that's about, at a very minimum, 1-to-1 olive oil to the amount of liquid that was in there, but generally like 2-to-1 will form a better emulsion. It's a very olive oil heavy salad. That's good, that's what makes the bread taste delicious. All right, so now we got this emulsified vinaigrette made from tomato juice. Yum, yum, woo, yum. All right, rough chop on the basil. I'm finishing up right now. Good. Tomatoes into the dressing. Bread. That's still hot, a little bit hot. It's all right. Ideally, you'd let this bread cool, but it's not gonna make too much difference. As long as it's not like sizzling hot. Bread into the bowl. Let's get right in there. I know it's gonna need some seasoning. Salt. Pepper. So the idea is that all the space that used to be taken up by water in that bread, we want it to get taken up by dressing. And so this is one of those salads where, you know, a lot of salads, you make them fresh, you serve them right away, otherwise they start to wilt. This is actually a salad where you give it a 30-minute rest and it actually is gonna be better. So you can make this in advance while you're finishing off the rest of your dinner, which is exactly what I'm gonna do today. But I'll try a bite of it anyway before we get to that point. Just to make sure that the seasoning is on. You know? Actually, the seasoning is perfect. All right, so finally, I'm gonna let this sit aside. I'll put this basil on top. I'm not gonna toss the basil into the dressing yet, because that olive oil will make the basil wilt. But I'll put this on top so that it's ready to go right before dinner time. Now I'm gonna make a chilled corn soup, which will be a completely separate video, but by the time I'm done with that, the salad will be ready to go. All right, I'll see you in just a little bit, in what, like 25-ish minutes or so? I don't know, something like that. I did make that corn soup, corn and basil soup. Here it is, it's beautiful, it's tasty. There will be a recipe for that that either has already gone up or will go up. All right, so we've absorbed most of that dressing. Now let's get into a bowl here. Panzanella is also good next day, although obviously refrigerating tomatoes overnight is going to take a little something out of them, but it's still good the next day. And the other thing you could always do is, if you have leftover Panzanella salad, add a cucumber, a couple bell peppers to it, and then puree it all the next day, and you'll have a delicious gazpacho. What do you think? I would take that home with me. I don't have to because I'm already home. Audrey, Alicia, dinner in like 3 minutes, all right? All right. Try some of that. Not a bit of wasted flavor. Those tomatoes are so good. Yeah, all right. Hamon and Shabu need their treat. Come on, guys. Too much garlic in there for you, but they love tomatoes. When I used to live in Harlem, we had lived on the 17th floor of an apartment building, and we had a pot with a tomato plant in it, cherry tomatoes. And we noticed one day that all the tomatoes below like 2 feet or so were missing, and it's because Hamon used to go and gently pluck them off with his jowls. Shabu, sit. There you go. Oh, I'll get you another one. Hamon is a cherry tomato fiend. Here you go, Shabu. Good girl. All right, guys, gals, non-binary pals, I will see you later. Bye-bye.